fellow artists and colleagues from Toxics Link and from other places. Um this whole project was a labor of love. It was started out as an open call, which uh, was Leonard Emmelering who encouraged that we do the uh, make a project in the open call, and then we finally got that project, which was supposed to be an in-person project before COVID, 2019. Then COVID came, and we reconfigured the project into an online project. And the online project was basically having conversations with practitioners, thinking about multi-species worlds, and they spring across many disciplines. Uh, and as an outcome of that, one of the byproducts or one of the other outcomes was this book, which is a contribution by 32 artists, some of whom are in the room. And there's Amruta from Mumbai, and I'm really surprised to see her. I didn't know she was in Delhi. So I just want to say a few words to give the context of what this project is and how it came about. And I'm going to read, it's just a few minutes. But also at the outset, I would like to, like when we talk of ecology, we talk of what non-extractivism, putting things back into their web contexts. I really want to start with acknowledging the people who made this project happen, because a project like this cannot happen just because it's one person doing it. There's a whole number of support systems which go around it. The support system of people like the Prince Claus and the Goethe Institute who've collaborated internationally to support environmental grants and environmental mentorship programs becomes really important why these kinds of ideas come to light. Uh, uh, Along with that was Toxics Link, an environmental organization which we started 30 years back, and Satish is here now from Toxics Link. And Toxics Link has been trying to raise questions which are trying to see what's going to happen in the future, and it's done pioneering work, even if I may say so, in number of areas, very practical areas like biomedical waste, electronic waste, heavy metals, chemicals in products, very often being almost shaping the field and being the first people to bring these issues to board. And so these kinds of experiences which have shaped my personal journey into the question of ecology, from dealing with issues of policy to seeing the limitations of issues of policy and the need for other thoughts, where I bring my ideas, and the artistic art space gives me the space to put those ideas forward. I mean, without thinking of what is art and what is non-art, but art as a space for ideas is where I think things like this prosper. And I've been trying to think of what are the important questions from my perspective, historically and for futures, which confront the idea of ecological sustainable futures, and which go beyond existing trajectories of policy and technology. So what are the other kinds of ideas and thoughts we have to think of? For this particular project, of course, I'd like to thank Toxics Link for supporting this, administratively for the Goethe Delhi for being a partner, but also for the Prince Claus and the Goethe Netherlands. But more particularly for the book itself, which 32 artists voluntarily contributed. So this is just because they wanted to contribute to this idea of conceptually thinking of what a multi-species world might look like from their perspective. Sukanya Dev, who's here, who's my partner in helping or doing all this thing. Moksha Vora, who helped design the book along with Ping Pong Studios, Kritika and Tejaswini, the Pragriti Press, and Parul Kejriwal, who's from Toxic Link, Shubhankar, who's here, who's helping doing the online project. But I just sort of speak a few words about the ideas around the book, and if I may just read that. So this project was an attempt to bring the conversations of multi-species worlds back to us, the everyday folks, to help recognize our deep connections, to encourage all of us just to reconnect back to our own lives. Through conversations with leading practitioners across a multitude of disciplines, which included poets, writers, artists, scientists, glaciologists, filmmakers, academics, legal scholars. And this diversity shows to you how I think, how fundamental and complex is this shift, that everyone and every discipline is involved. A project to include the more than human world in the social contract is a means to renegotiate a very complex and multitude relationships with the planet. I believe we humans need to decenter ourselves, but can only be done through ourselves. No outside agency seems to have the power to do this anymore. However, not to do it is at our own peril, since in a deep time sense, we still have to pass the test of survival as a species. When people, plants, and animals were extracted from their local moorings and transported to the old world to capture the new world's life-giving objects as knowledge, it began the processes of a deep pedagogic colonization. These extractions were not only physical displacements, they also caused the loss of the web of cultural, linguistic, and everyday meanings to be replaced in systems of new bare scientific classifications. They became the other, far removed from being a complex entanglement of life and life forms. Relationships changed, as did the new ecologies produced, creating new binary nomenclatures which were defined like indigeneity, exotic, nature, culture, etc. Life became foreign to its own image. Over hundreds of years, the anthropogenic gaze has become supreme, that reversing it already becomes a major endeavor. Indeed, you might call it a radical act. In this ecological condition, apparent more so since the great acceleration of the 20th century, but possibly centuries in the making, we have come to define the moment as an ecological crisis. For a crisis, it is now only an expected one, not surprising at all. In fact, the Club of Rome of 1971, before even the Stockholm Conference, had already predicted that we were exceeding planetary limits. But all this is history. However, the way we understand histories has great bearings on the present. As new ways of writing histories are emerging, as if these webs of connections mattered, that the more than human world was never separate from the human one, only we chose to see it as such. In the recent book, Entangled Lives, authored by Joy Pachau and William von Schendel, the opening lines are, how can we think human histories by including animals and plants? They suggest to downplay human agency so that the course of history is steered by agental entanglements between humans and their environments. Today we are getting to know better the deep co-evolutions with viruses, bacteria, and other organisms which are deeply embedded into our very bodies, as Pranay Lal makes a strong case for in his book, Invisible Empires, and in his conversations in the project. To think radically today is maybe merely to recognize things as they are, to unlock the boundaries of extractive pedagogic framings and allow the other to seep back in our history writings, in our understandings, in our cultural and literary thinking, to return to this complexity of which we humans are just a part. And I do, for one, believe in the connections between environmental justice and multi-species justice and their inextricability. However, that conversation is for another day. The answers lie not far away, but within in our thinking and actions. In an ethico-onto-epistemology, in Karen Barrad's words. What does that imply? I can do no better than to refer and quote from Edward Cohen, the well-known anthropologist and author of How Forests Think. And I quote, thinking ethics ecologically requires that we rethink what we mean by thought. We tend to think of thought as something exclusively human. There is, of course, a distinctively human way of thinking. The root cause of our planetary crisis, with all of its ecological, social, and political reverberations, is a tendency for humans to see ourselves as separate from the world and to act in ways that further this separation. So an understanding of human thought that emphasizes only its autonomy from the rest of life gets in the way of the kind of ethics we need. There exists, however, a larger arena of thought that holds the symbolic, a kind of thinking that, when we recognize it as thought in its own right, allows us to think in a different way. We need to reimagine our relationships to a larger living world that truly, but in sometimes counterintuitive ways, also thinks. Ethics emerges from the aesthetics because, as a higher order emergent thought process in its own right, it's itself grounded in the ways in which indices emerge from icons. A forest, understood as a vast and multi-layered ecology of mind, expresses all those emergent properties as well as their continuities with their dynamics that sustain them. This is why learning to attend to how we humans are continuous with its kind of thought is so central to cultivating an ethics that is ecological. And now, my friend and somebody who helps me with my web design and everything has helped. Sukanya and Amjad have extracted 8 minutes from the 21 one-hour conversations which are on site, which anybody can visit. So this is just a small extraction, and they've taken weeks to do it. So I request you to kindly see that 8 minutes, and after that, Katrina and I will launch the book and then do the panel discussion. Thank you.